Mr. Taylor.
Here.
Councilwoman Herbert, E. Herbert. Here. Dr. Buckles.
Here.
Mr. Brennan. Mr. McDowell.
Yes.
He is here. I hear him.
Yes.
He murmured over here. Here.
Yeah. Yes.
Reverend McDowell, can you give us a word of prayer from your home office?
Yeah. Eternal God, for all that is among us, all that you bless us with, we simply ask that you might surround us with your love and with your care. Undergird us with prayer, and yet undergird us with a sensitivity that might continue to forge forth a resilient city and a city that is filled with purpose. We ask it in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, Reverend McDowell as well from remote. We are, I guess, continuing. This is like the part 2 of the discussion at this point on the follow-up items with our newly passed budget. But some very important items, our general capital project, planned and proposed projects and programs, many of which you'll find as we work our way through the discussion are things that I am encouraging you to strongly consider from an internal perspective of the needs of our city, but then also some additional programs that I know are very important to many of you and ideas that you've had that we try to incorporate into some recommendations. And then we'll finish the discussion with an additional item on the purchase and sale of real property. So with that, we'll get started with general capital projects. With Missy Cochran, Budget Program Manager and Grant Director. Of course, Jeff and I will jump in as needed.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. As Ms. Wilson mentioned, this is an ongoing conversation we've been having with you all. So today we are talking specifically about general capital projects and projects. You received material with Erica. I think they just had the extra copies if you didn't have any in PowerPoint from today. There's just a review of the materials that can go through from the send an email out to you on Friday. So today, a lot of what we're talking about today with our capital projects and with the programmatic things, as Ms. Wilson mentioned, it lends itself to an opportunity to talk with you all again about our special revenue sources. There's a lot of things that we'll be talking about when we recommend some funding from our special revenue streams. And of course, we've discussed those things several times during the budget workshop. Again, we'll go back over those a little bit more detail, cover a little bit about what they are eligible for and used for, especially with some of the revenue streams that we don't typically talk about during our budget process. So we'll also talk about our general capital projects, and proposed projects and programs, and ARPA update or the American Rescue Plan Act, and then of course city manager recommendations. And time permitted, we'll cover the community relations grant program that was discussed with you during the budget process. So first off, with regards to special revenue is a reference regarding governmental accounts, those revenue streams that are generated for a specific purpose, established by law, whether by state code or city ordinance, designated for specific purposes and functions. This can include hospitality tax, occupation tax, state accommodation tax, tourism development fees, liquor rebate, and so forth. It also refers to grants. Again, grants are also designated for specific purposes. Grant will initiate a grant program. We either apply for the grant or receive the grant, and the grant to be utilized in which the grant was awarded for. Community Development Block Grant, FEMA, DOJ, funds from the state or federal government, so forth. Several of the projects that are being proposed are potentially eligible from some of these special revenue streams, as well as these grants. And of course, part of what we also want to talk about is current year commitments with regards to the operating budget and how much we can pay for operating budget, but also to those things that could have impact on future commitments in future budgets. As we like to often refer to one-time revenues or one-time expenses, as we try to stay within those guidelines as we are considering allocations from different financial sources. The hospitality tax commitments, everyone is familiar with our hospitality tax revenues. City Council utilizes the hospitality tax committee to make allocations for grant programs administered through the hospitality tax fund. Of course, those funds again are to be utilized according to state law, which state primarily is for tourism, tourism-related buildings, cultural, recreational, and historical facilities, highways, roads, streets, and bridges providing access to tourism destinations, advertising information related to the development of tourism, and water and sewer infrastructure related to tourism. So again, hospitality tax, the 2% meal tax, as it's often referred to, is specifically for promotion of tourism activities. When the city utilizes these funds or when we grant them out, we're still subject to the UTD fund side of state law. The second part of the law also states about there being at least $900,000 in accommodation tax collected, which the city does receive, and utilize these funds for the operations and maintenance of those items and facilities directly attendant to those facilities that are tourism related. Any questions about hospitality tax? We generate about $12 million, total $13 million annually in hospitality tax revenue now.
Can you use it for parks?
Yes, sir, recreational. And we haven't even done that. Multi-use venues. We've used it for a number of park projects in the past as well.
Do you have a percentage breakdown currently? H-tax as far as infrastructure, local groups?
So, at one point in time, the allocation to external is running about $3 million, about 13. So it was about a third or so.
Okay.
And then we also have debt service, which would have been for debt for city facilities, multi-use venues. We also utilized it from some of the Greenway development help was funded by hospitality tax.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also use the transfer directly to the general fund. So that's our the line item agencies are an additional $2 million on that $3 million. So really that number's closer to 5.5 million.
On the H-tax group use? Okay, so it's 5 instead of 3.
Right.
The transfer to the general fund used for public safety.
It is used for public facilities that are eligible for H-tax. Sometimes that is police, some of it's also some of our public works facilities, parks and recreation, and other things. Of course of that. Any other questions about hospitality? State accommodations tax, this one is a little bit more stringent in terms of the rules, are more specific with regards to the rules. Again, the city utilizes accommodation tax committee, which is also set forth by state law. This is referred to the state accommodation tax, often referred to as local or state accommodation. And we'll talk about a lot of it. There are two of those. The state law is very deliberate in terms of how the funds are to be used. $25,000 directly to the general fund. 5% is for general purposes, also used for general fund purposes. The remainder, the 30% balance, is used typically for, you'll hear that referred to as the advertising fund. It's to utilize for advertising and promotion of tourism and related tourism development to increase tourism. And then, of course, 55% is also related to tourism-related expenditures. So 30% is also called out in state law, must be allocated to specifically a Chamber of Commerce, Convention Visitor Bureau, a Regional Tourism Commission. If those don't exist, you can also, the municipalities or counties can create, nonprofit organizations. Any questions about one on with regard to the state accommodation tax?
So
Or outlining the kind of the other.
how much, and I know this varies based on usage, but what's the average amount that we get every year?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. We collect around, $2.6 million is the budget projected this year for state accommodation tax.
And that can be used for parks too,
It is, so.
and restaurants, right?
So under, the 65% tourism-related expenditures, state law includes 8 different categories of what qualifies as tourism-related expenditures, which includes advertisement and promotion of tourism, promotion of the arts and cultural events, construction, maintenance, and operations of those civic and cultural activities, criminal justice or law enforcement, fire protection, solid waste, related to tourism facilities, based on an estimated percentage of the cost of those that's directly related to tourism. And that gets into a little, very specific in terms of how much of the funds can be used that way. Public facilities such as restrooms, dressing rooms, parks, and parking lots. Tourism shuttle, control and repair of waterfront erosion, and then operating of a visitor information center.
So, I think Councilman Taylor asked about restaurants. Can it be used for restaurant incentives?
Restaurants.
Restaurants.
Restrooms.
Okay. Gotcha. My other question, can it be used for restaurant incentives? We talked about a grease trap rebate, those types of programs as a restaurant improvement.
That's probably a question more for our city attorney. I would refer back to her. This is the accommodation, so this would refer more to Ms. Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, we're the opinion that they can't.
Okay, thank you.
You talking about the ATAX?
Eight,
We're on APAC.
We're on the ATAX.
not eight.
This H, to clarify, H.
There's a question about H tax too.
Yeah, food tax, which is his on bid. I would say, as we're all aware, in prior years and several years, these funds have been allocated primarily to 2 organizations, by the city, if you mentioned Visitor Bureau and Lake Marine Tourism. And that was, been in place for several years. One other item that's very specific to state accommodation tax is the TURC committee, it's the tourism committee, as it's referred to, or that is required, the city is required to submit our expenditures to, and they're subject to review by the committee. We also have to receive the budget from the organizations in which the funds are allocated to, and we also, again, have to have a committee that reviews the allocations and make recommendations to the council.
The TURC committee was one of the reasons why the city decided 15 years ago or whatever to start dividing it up, 85-15 to Experience Columbia and Murray Country, because the TURC committee, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be very aggressive. And cities like Myrtle Beach and Pawleys Island and some of the others always had a problem with the TURC committee telling them they couldn't do some of the things they wanted to do. So that's why, one of the reasons why the city of Columbia settled on the 85-15. They knew it was approved.
So there's a lot of information about the tourism, the TURC committee. We do comply with the requirements and submit our annual reporting to the TURC committee as a state by law and Department of Revenue.
Who's on that oversight committee?
I'm not familiar with who is on that committee at this point in time.
I think it'd be very helpful if we could get staff to get us who is on that committee, what changes they've done with other communities, and any of their updated cases or whatever they put out. I think it'd be good for us to know, and it may be good for us to go sit in front of them and have a conversation about you know, how things are evolving and what's going on and how people are leveraging different funding sources.
You did provide us at our last work session, the spending plans from other communities in the Midlands that were on lots of other things.
Yes, sir, that's right.
It's just the same thing we're talking about.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Not if it's hospitality. Accommodations.
Next is the tourism development fee. This one is not one that we talk about often in our budget process. So this is the local accommodation tax, or tourism development fee. The fund is established by city ordinance, according to state law. It is also a 3% accommodation tax, imposed very similarly as state accommodation tax. We generate about $4 million a year in these revenue streams. These funds have been used for the COP fund, also with support of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. That agreement with the Convention and Visitors Bureau expires in December of this year.
What's the COPS bond?
That is strictly a solicitation. That was what the bill will be convention.
Are there any restrictions on
Tourism,
that? Local tourism.
there are restrictions for similar, there used to be, also for tourism. They're used, I think, similarly to state law, but we can summarize those.
I mean, well, if you can use it under state accommodations law, you could use it under this.
You're just sighing, so.
I've got a question about that too. I mean, my question, like for parks, is that an eligible expenditure for?
My understanding it is if we document it, and that's part of what we need to do is we revamp a convention center document, because obviously at 12/31, the dynamics are changing, the partnerships are changing. Jackson County is no longer be part of the convention center.
Yes, that's correct. So I believe we could utilize, it might depend on the park and who is utilizing that park. So I think we've said this before, we'll have to have some public statements as to the public use and the tourism part of that. When we actually passed the ordinance in 1996, there's some language in there that addresses this. I'm not sure if it's actually in this presentation.
But Jeff, let me make it easy, specifically Finley Park, you know, downtown. Jeff, while you're up there.
And remember, I am not legal, so.
What's the Teresa on your thing?
Giving
He's putting an asterisk by his answer.
Okay, we got the tourism development fee passed before the local fiscal authority act set up the local accommodation tax. We treat this as the local accommodation tax. Do we have to meet the requirements of the local accommodation tax, or as Mr. Taylor said, are we a little bit freer to use this money for other things since we got it on the books before the fiscal authority?
Yeah, and I don't know the answer. I actually thought the same thing, and I don't know why this never popped in my head, but as y'all were talking about that, I was thinking about how we passed this in 96, and then you mentioned local accommodation. That is something I'm going to need to go and talk with Teresa Knox and probably Michael Season just to verify. He may have addressed it. He sent me a long draft last week while I was out. I was unaware I had received it, so I'm trying to read it in between meetings today. So that may be addressed in there. So if I can answer it before today's over, I'll let you know. If not, I'll have the answer here shortly.
And the other part of that, the other part of that question is, since this is our local accommodation tax, should we take the opportunity, since we're going to be making changes anyhow in some of the documents, to now start calling it the local accommodation tax? Because we don't, of course, there is a tourism development fee in the state law, and we don't qualify for it.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm not legal, so I don't know for sure. Those are good questions, so we'll look into that. Now, if we were.
Some of that's going to come to bubble up over the next.
Yeah, I think as we're working, tourism development fee in this current year, and since we'll be starting budgeting, coming back up in the next few months. As we're dealing with it, these are all good questions that we want to answer sooner rather than later, so we know what direction we're going ahead on these things. So I'll work with Teresa Knox, and we'll finalize the answers to those. I had, in general, thought if we meet the requirements that were written in the ordinance from 1996, that and if we were utilizing the funds for Finley Park, I don't know if we were going to need to make any changes. We may need to make some changes with an agreement with the convention center, depending upon what the split is there, and what we're using for Finley Park, if that's what y'all choose to do. In general, I do not think we would have to change the name of that if it meets that, but again, I'm going to have to do some follow-up just to make sure of that.
The last special revenue that will come here is a liquor rebate. This is also a state-established law that the city has to pass. We also have not updated the budget because much in our budget process as well. A little bit more. This is basically it's referred to in state law as a temporary permit, but this is a liquor rebate permit. It was very specific as well in terms of utilization for those funds on specific allocations.
Marinas, you're gonna have us a new marina on the river.
For beach, lots of beach reference, lots of beach reference.
I also find it interesting because this was never really disclosed to us before about the local youth mentor program. Because it was always, to be quite honest, it's always been portrayed to us that this is only being used for historical renovations and everything else. But, you know, there's a lot more flexibility in this. So as we discussed, this could be a good source for us from year to year to do one time.
Sure, there was, the last most significant, the most current significant allocation of these funds was for the construction of stormwater studios, a grant for construction of stormwater studios, as well as an allocation to renovations for Community Music Festival Association. This took some time, a little bit of time now, but
How much is left in the account now? Because I think those are the only two that I.
right. We also utilize the funds for historic one-vehicle repair to the city's historic homes with our capital repairs. But there have not been any capital repairs recently, and none are requested at this point in time that are made.
So,
I think capital repairs, capital improvements.
and what I would say is, you know, obviously we want to, depending on what the last 4 years look like, we probably want to have a portion reserved for that. But there is a little bit more flexibility for us to look at in the future. I think it's like $400,000.
We collect about $350 to $400,000 a year. I would say too, in the past, the city staff has recommended to reserve 10% in all of these sources of revenue in these funds over time, like we have in the general fund or other money sources, especially since the majority of these funds are utilized externally. Should the city, for instance, the first year of COVID, had we not had some kind of hold at that point in time, you know, allocating these funds 100%, you know, allocating them 100%, but you don't collect all revenues, we are then faced with tough decisions, and organizations receiving those funds as well. This is recommended by the city both. But yes, there's a specific reference to utilizing for local youth mentor programs, for juvenile offenders under jurisdiction of family court. It's also important to point out that the revenues may not be used for operating expenses of tourism related buildings. This really is referred to as the capital fund.
Let's think about things.
As long as it is being capital. Meaning something in this case, you know, add to the construction of the restroom facility. Construction would be.
Sports field?
I don't know that I read that again.
I read that under parks.
Yeah.
You can do a marina in parks, you can do a sports field with it.
Does it park and recreation?
The park, and the public restroom, which is a hot topic these days.
Lots of tourism opportunities here with these funds.
I will tell you after being, so the city on Saturday again is growing, and growing. A lot of new vendors there this weekend. It's great.
Any questions about those special revenue streams?
Anybody have any questions at this point? Follow-ups? I know we got a few items to follow up. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add? Kaufman?
Moving on into the proposed general fund capital improvement program. As you all may remember, during the budget discussions, when you passed the operating budget, you also approved a capital budget for our enterprise fund, for water, sewer, stormwater, and parking fund. The general fund was postponed for another time for now. So we are looking at our general capital projects now. General capital projects are those activities that are related to city facilities that are non-enterprise funds, supporting our parks and recreation facilities, our city buildings that are, again, not utility operated, fire stations, police stations. Those would be the things that make up our primarily our general fund with supportive activities. We also, and then in the capital improvement program, the city has a threshold that determines what is eligible for our capital improvement program, which is a $25,000 or more is part of the eligibility, as well as purchase or construction or otherwise acquisition of an asset that adds to the city's overall fiscal work of the city. You may see in both our operating funds, whether it's general fund or water, sewer, stormwater, and so forth, capital outlays. Those are operating capital. Those would be those things that are $5,000 or above, and are part of the annual operating budget. Vehicles are common. Vehicles and heavy equipment are often part of the capital operating budget.
And so the major difference is the threshold for the outlays?
The threshold, and then it has to be a physical asset, and construction, addition to a facility, I don't want to say major in the sense of any kind of, an improvement to the building, something that improves the add value to the building. So for one facility, water and sewer, of course, and stormwater, parking has a different, it still is the $25,000 threshold, but the type of construction, of course, is different. The first year of the CIP, or capital improvement program, is what's approved in the capital budget. Future years are just for planning purposes. It's intended to show you future needs and future capital needs. The first year, of course, is capital budget. The general fund in most recent years and even further back, primarily we have funded general capital projects when we have a capital improvement program for our general fund. It's been funded through fund balance, and sometimes some special revenues, or in some cases, when we have issues, debt allows for being installed in revenue funds. The general fund operating budget is probably one of the areas, capital funding for capital improvement program is probably one of the other areas that most need in the general fund overall, in terms of being able to have some recurring funding that is not part of fund balance, that in order to address some of our capital needs, as you'll see in the request, are those things that are, they meet the thresholds of capital, but they have some reoccurrence to them in a schedule of upgrades or improvements. Our HVAC unit being an example. So in the packet that you received, and I try not to add too much into the slides because I know that the materials are so, the type and font is very small. so the, capital improvement program, of course, reflects a request. The departments that have submitted capital improvement this year include general services, which are support facilities and works, fire department, police department, parks and recreation. Of course, again, year one is the first year of the request, and in future years going out for 5 years. Some projects we have funding allocated to them. What you'll see on here for those projects are the additional funds needed to complete the project. The city does not initiate a capital improvement project or a water project until all funds are fully approved and allocated, unless the project is somehow phased out and specifically has some kind of line of demarcation where you can phase out the construction and procurement. So typically, you're not going to see anything on here or anything that goes out for construction that doesn't have the funds fully allocated to them. Let's get into all the details of the different projects that are on there requested. There is a city manager's list of recommended projects, and we'll go through a little more. Or, of course, if you do have questions about the list that was provided to you, let us know. Next, in this list is being discussed today in part because of allocations from one-time funding sources and balance, but also too, as we just continue our conversations, it's really it's a list of planned and proposed projects, and as we've described them to you in the materials, these are projects that either have some kind of major significance or importance, but they are also items that might have been discussed or requested by city council. We've included in these projects as well, projects meaning those things that are more one-time, most likely a capital type of expense, but also some things that are programmatic and you have recurring costs and will have an impact on operating budget. We want to be able to talk about those in that time.
Is that list voted on? So as we sit here, we talk about those projects that the city manager put forth, and it's funded. We voted on the general funding. Now it's being split up into those capital improvements. Does that need to be voted on for the final list?
So this list here is just a culmination of some things that have been voted on or in progress, some things that have been discussed but maybe not voted on. They are voted on either like the capital program. If city council desires to make these allocations, you can bring that up and add it to your discussion for next week's city council meeting. So approval for consideration, and you approve either the entire general capital project list, just as you do one or somewhere. The other items on the list, you could either pull them out separately, and vote on, decide on them as individual projects, or allocations. The city council would need to allocate moving forward on those activities.
So the goal today is for us to get some direction on some of these.
Some of the proposed, a lot of in progress, so we're talking more of the proposed.
Right. Those that are in progress, again, this is intended to be a comprehensive list. Probably every day we look at it, we'll probably see something else. But those things that are in progress are things that have been funded or are a significant to the council again, or just major projects. For instance, the canal embankment, obviously, that's a significant project that we're carrying forward. Again, there's water source, but also the things that we funded in this year, that the council awarded or funded through the installment purchase revenue bond. So we just elevated it to this list as well.
Is the list we're going to be discussing the city manager's list?
Yes.
And you'll see some of these make their way to that list. So we were trying to kind of go through the capital and then some of the things that are more programmatic that you've mentioned, and then my attempt at making some suggestions to you that pull.
I would also add that operationally, these projects don't reside on this list. Once they are awarded and funded or enacted, they are either being allocated or they are being supported and reported on city finances based on the funding source. If it's a general capital project, we have a general capital project. If it's water and sewer allocated, then it's water and sewer funded. grants or track by each grant. So again, this is just a bring forth a culmination of a variety of different projects. So, again, this list is not meant for us to talk on this spreadsheet, you will see it. I did break it out into two different lists. The first section, that's in the package is in green, that are good. It is, again, these are items that are primarily one-time or capital, not like the capital, but primarily one-time, having this, what are we talking about that?
I think you all have the printed out version of what was, well, it's bigger than the other package.
In here on packet,
Yeah.
it says packet page 10. It's
Yeah.
the third sheet on the spreadsheet.
Is it in the one we got today?
No, it's in the what was provided to us.
Yeah, it's, I think it's, well, I
Yeah,
have one,
it's-
yeah, she just handed it to you all today, too, didn't it?
Right, so I think, yeah, the list is, if you didn't print, yeah, you also gave everybody a copy of the other.
Yeah.
And that list is everything is on one, is on that one, and it's PowerPoint, I think, that's written out, so we can keep it.
So we're looking at the green page. Much bigger print. Thank you.
You're welcome. So again, this is the plan for this project. There's a variety of different projects. The ones that we probably would want to spend more time on today were those things that are proposed. And again, when we come forward with the city manager's recommendations, we can discuss them in more detail as well. They're proposed, in the sense that they're still pending some additional allocation of funding and approval, final commitment, by city council. As you mentioned, these projects, these projects forward for require city council approval. Whether it's an acknowledgement of this list here, or when it comes time for, and we really would not go out for procurement on any items. But we also know city council has, there's been several projects or programs or programmatic type of activities that have been brought forward by city council that we try to acknowledge and capture here as well. Again, it's either for continued discussions by city council or, potential approval or decision by city council at the next regular council meeting. So at this point, I don't know if we want to go through these projects more specifically here, or if we want to call out any specific projects or programs, or if we want to go through and get to the recommended findings list.
Can we go through it? And I think what would be helpful, is we have the top portion is in progress, so those are all moving. Maybe good for everybody to get an update where those projects are. Can we do that? Just a quick run through. I think it'd be helpful because a lot of these things have been going on and are transitioned into this term of council.
You want to start at the top and look at the canal also?
Might as well start at the top and just work our way down.
Canal embankment,
That's kind of easy to get.
and the head gate.
Things from
I'll let Clint just get really quick update for the three of those. I think Chief can take the next one, the tree camera, citywide project.
So I'll be brief, and we do have an update pending. We're working on an update to push out to, on social media. But starting off with the alternate water supplies, we received the Building Resilience for Infrastructure grant, over $32 million out of funding 75% of the project, 25% is to be funded by water and sewer revenue. It's part of our CIP that was allocated last year, $15 to $14 million. So that money is sitting in a bucket, ready to go. 100% drawings complete. We're in the middle of our environmental and historic preservation review. We anticipate bidding as early as this December for that project.
You're still on the water supply.
Yes, sir, the alternate water supply down to the embankment. So, the canal embankment, again, the scope negotiated with FEMA, that's not for a dollar amount, it's estimated between 40 and 45 million. we've negotiated a scope of work, so if there's cost escalation, that cost is covered, no cost to our ratepayers. We are in the middle of, and nearing the end of the environmental assessment and historic and preservation assessment that we begin, hoping that that'll be completed in September. We have 30% drawings complete, and we can't move forward with completion of our design until the environmental assessment work is done.
What's the time frame for those designs to be completed after the bugs and bunnies are done?
Yes, sir. After bugs and bunnies, we anticipate.
So they call it the bugs and bunnies done.
Completing design toward the end of this year and moving into bidding February timeframe of 2023. If we hold that bidding timeframe, construction completion will be June of summer of 2025.
Can I ask you just a general question will apply to this and the rest of them? Missy, would it be possible to take and do this, stretch it out 5, 6, 7 years where you could estimate when the spending is going to occur? And so we kind of, instead of having to ask every year, we've got to kind of what your projected timeline is. And I think every project, you know.
Well, what's great about that is that fits into the manager's dashboard. It'll fit perfectly in the dashboard.
That's right. That's fine. But again, I think part of this would be, it would show when you, again, expect to expend certain funds. You know, like I say.
We will have to do that regardless, I think, for the grant purposes as well.
But I'll just do it for this whole chart if you can.
Quickly, for the 3 design packages being bid as one?
No, sir, they're separate funding sources, and they have slightly separate requirements for security as well. The third piece is the canal head gates, which was through HUD. It was a CDBG mitigation award of $8 million, $8 million allocated that. We're replacing all 12 head gates, 60% design complete. We're in the permitting stage of that and the environmental assessment. That's a little different since it's HUD regulations versus FEMA and PERC. Hoping to bid that late this calendar year as well, if all goes well. That has a construction completion of June of 2024, so a little bit easier work. Those are the first 3. I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Clint.
Yes, sir.
I'll add more, Clint said here too about the bridge is a FEMA grant, but it's specifically the brick grant. The city was the state's only large recipient of that grant, and one of the largest of the entire grant program across the country, and the largest in the southeast, Shakespeare.
So that's important that we apply for everything we can.
Gregory Tucker has been our internal budget so far, and we hope that will be perfect.
Thank you, Clint. I'm going to ask you, Colbert, to come up for the next 3, and we can jump in, chief, as needed on demolitions and the EOC CAD, roof, window, CPD fixings, which I know you're extremely happy about.
Yes, ma'am. So the first one was the
Citywide security camera.
citywide security camera project. We anticipate a project launch in September. We've obviously been behind schedule with supply issues with the chips and some of the components of the cameras. We anticipate probably the 3rd week of September, pushing a meeting with Wilson Mayor, whoever you all would like to be there to talk about the scope of the project, what we've done, some deliverables in the near future, and in September, the initial cameras will start beginning to be installed, and that'll continue to progress, and we'll be able to lay out more of a kind of a timeline on installation, how long it takes to install each one. And we hope to be able to do more of a demonstration of capability for you all to understand just the significance of the technology in October.
Chief, just I think the answer is yes. So we have gotten input, or plan on getting input, from merchant associations in our hospitality districts about the placement of those cameras.
So the placements of cameras are predicated about Conrad and our analysis that we've done. We have strategically placed camera locations, obviously, we do quite a bit in our business entertainment districts. And we've also placed those in concert with some of our LPR units, license plate readers.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of complement one another, but one of the things that I think is going to be very important to how we were able to scale this program up is public-private partnerships with our business community moving forward with connectivity and future purchasing of what I know is we are transitioning more to live feed and real-time monitoring. A lot of the businesses have asked us about the technology and the type of cameras that we're providing, and we've been providing that vendor information along with this. Any other questions related to the camera project?
Next will be the demolition, which we allocated the $571,000 of American Rescue Plan funding, and I know David is busily moving that along.
Yes, I think we were just finishing up some of the asbestos studies and abatements. I believe we're on, D-Day as far as knocking them down. I actually talked to him today about, the funding for this, and he thinks that, we'll be pressed to get all that done with that amount. I asked him if he's going to need more money, and he says that is sufficient for the number of demolitions that they have and the capacity to knock them down.
Is that gonna be 80 demolitions?
68, I think.
68. Are those, is it a grant or forgivable loan or what?
It's
Risking it up.
we had.
What's our program? I mean, the reason I'm asking, we were just talking about different things. At one point, we were talking about making a grant to put it back on the market.
David's recommendation is that we put a lien on it afterwards, and then come back and forgive it when people reinvest in it, is a way to keep it flowing.
That's the reason I was asking, so that money would recycle at some point.
No, well, if somebody doesn't pay, yeah.
Why would we give why would we forgive the lien?
To forgive the lien, to encourage growth, so people just don't sit on it. Because what we're having is if you look in some of the more challenged areas, if you look at the lots and how long they've been empty, there's no incentive for folks to continue to move forward.
And it was in the entire amount.
Huh?
Yeah,
because it's rescue money. That's why we use that.
Well, okay, I guess this may not be the case, but we worked out how that's gonna work. I just wanna make sure.
To be honest with you, I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head.
I just wanna make sure that if we give them the incentive, that we don't forgive it until after they have rebuilt.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose.
So, yeah.
People will take it and.
Depending on the funding source, the ARPA funds, they're allowed for demolition, but the purpose is not to seek a lien and be refunded for it. It's kind of separate apart from our regular demolitions. And I think David's out there telling people we're not coming after liens. We're doing part of this funding, like the Fed is to do with demolition. So we do be seeking liens on those. Typically, in the normal course, we do get liens.
But I know it's not the purpose, but it's just something that prevents
Well, actually, that's, if you do it and you make it within a period of time and it's within that 4-year term extended, that's not the case. So I think we need to clarify that legally, because we looked into that, before, because within the 4-year time period of ARPA money, it's still considered operating money at that point. And then at the end of it, so you could put I thought my understanding was there's a time frame put on getting those properties back into the marketplace, either sold or staying within like a 24 or 36 months.
And all
which would fit into it.
It's specifically for demolition, the special provisions just for demolition.
Well, let's confirm that, and then let's bring it back so we can make sure that we're all moving forward.
And just for my clarity, so what you're saying is that our understanding is that you cannot place a lien because we are using federal funding, with this particular funding?
For the demolition, the federal funding comes with lots of requirements, and it's knowing, and it also affects what the future use of that property is too. So that's the kind of the catch for using the federal dollars for that demolition.
Okay, and we are able to use the property the way we want to, right? So we don't lose it.
It's not our property. It's not our property.
How do we control?
Because all we have is a lien on it. We're not, we don't own the property.
So they would pay back $8,300 on average of the cost to tear down the,
Right.
when we forget it.
Because I think the properties are challenging with this, is if they had the money to invest in it, they would have done it. So, but what we don't want to end up is a lot more blank slates in our neighborhoods.
And let me just add, I think it's a real help to a lot of these folks that can't sell a piece of property that may have a burned out house or something on it because of the cost to demo it.
Yeah.
Now puts them in a position to sell it, and we get the infill and everything. So I think it helps the little guy and helps the city.
That's a win-win.
There's no, we're not condemning it, we're just demolishing it. We're on the right. We don't own the property.
Your responses need to be recorded in the future. But hey, I'm taking it from the boss lady over here in the corner, and she says goes. Thank you, Chief.
And Chief, well, maybe two more Chiefs, sorry. And Harry isn't in here, but I know y'all are all working on these purchases of the CAD unit for the EOC, the installation of the Mylar windows and perimeter fencing of the EOC and CPD. I think the Mylar is complete, CAD's in progress, and you may want to focus on the fencing.
The fencing's a very important item that we discussed and planned for really over the last year. We finalized the planning, and we're in the final stages. We hope to start poking some holes in the ground in the next 45 to 60 days and complete the project in the next 3 to 4 months.
This is at headquarters.
It's at headquarters and also at the EOC.
Y'all speak in codes, I'm new.
Emergency operations. Yes, sir.
Last time I heard that, it was the education oversight.
They may need
And then, Chief, I'm gonna jump down to the Florida Drive, the police new recruit and admin facility up there.
So we completed the Ford Drive, this facility that recruiting, hiring, the one-stop shop we talked about in budget. We're very excited about that. We completed the drawings for what I'm not minimizing what goes in the upfit, but it's pretty minimal. There's great curb appeal outside, looks great. We don't really think there's anything other than signage inside. We're having put a few walls up and closing creating a couple offices, but it's going to be a fantastic facility.
Where's Florida Drive?
Where?
On the curve of the street.
Down Assembly, just past, across the railroad tracks, just past like the old lines and.
It's all the old SCG building back there that stuck back, that real nice building that they kind of left there.
There's a sewer project, I think, going along right.
Okay, there's another Florida Drive.
Yeah, it's not the one at Forest Acres.
I just want to make sure.
This is not AC.
No, I just didn't know.
And Chief, you may want to touch upon just some, that was just rounding out just looking at all the planned and pending ones. There's some reference to CPD headquarters planning, but that's a bigger discussion and kind of an ongoing discussion. Some planning, so I think probably that'd be a potential property purchase. We don't know where we are, and there's a potential we can say where we are and expand, right?
And the lot that's behind headquarters would be something
We could look at. Okay, thank you, Chief. Let's, jump back, the part rehab, that is, I don't know if that needs much explanation, Henry, but you want to give an update on where you are?
That was just last number.
Number one priority that we've had as staff. I think we've got a recommendation that we'll get to here shortly, of coupling some of these funding sources to try to get this done.
As far as government markets concerned, we're in a very good space, regarding the design work. We are due to be complete with the design in December, so we'll be shovel ready in December, and the whole business, moving to the RV phase starting in January, so we're in good shape regarding that.
Which park is that?
Philly Park.
Okay? And then, do you want
Can I ask just, I mean, just tell me if this is if it's not the appropriate time, and it should be later. I mean, but you're not recommending or that we put any money into Family Park this year, or should we talk about that when you get down to the recommendations?
Yes, so
I'm happy to wait.
Yes, so we have a recommendation. And then the fleet building, Henry?
So we have been working diligently on expanding our fleet facility. We have been experiencing some capacity issues. We have really been working on outside, which has been a challenge for our fleet department. So we're looking to expand our facility to accommodate the work that's being done. And Child and Associates is currently trying to design for that. So that's in progress.
And for the record, I want to make sure if Jimmy's listening, Jimmy, we keep working with you on projects. Don't say you're not getting any business from the city of Columbia. I want to say, for the record, I am excited that we're investing in the fleet. These are forgotten heroes in my book. These guys are working late nights and making sure our fleet and our public service and all our vehicles are being taken care of. So I do think we need to make sure the work conditions there are right.
Getting gas yesterday, or was recently, and I mean, there's a person that was being cleaned over there, working really hard, but we gotta get that done. Let's see, Henry, do you have any others you wanna speak to under in progress or plan or pending? Well, and I guess the municipal complex, obviously, council will hear from Chairman Taylor for Economic and Community Development Committee. We had a report today, or a meeting today, and discussed just very briefly moving forward with our staff, working with Councilman Boone on some ideas to move that forward. Okay.
And just in the municipal court, we have some routine paintwork that needs to be done to include some litigation work for the rest of the ADA compliance. I think that's the main concern. There's restroom facilities in the basement that are not ADA compliant, and then as far as the municipal court, they don't have a fire system in place, so that's a big deal for us as well. So those are some things we're working on regarding the municipal court, so that's in progress.
Very good. Thank you, sir. The Olympia Fire Station, I think it's just the chief is here. I don't know if it's Stacy or Henry, if y'all wanted to speak to that. Obviously, the management up there is finalizing the location. The MIT grant is the funding source, and we want to stay within that budgeted amount there if at all possible, but look,
you know, I think this item has some things that we need to probably discuss as a group, involving where that location is and where we are, probably not in this setting, but in the near future, that probably is going to solve some issues for us.
okay. Did you want to speak to Bull Street Parking Phase 2, Jeff, at all? That's what it is. Potential, it sort of is what it is, and we're on the hook for that, but I think there might be some ongoing discussions about the next phase. It's not for the group.
I don't have anything to add.
You know,
Gregory Tucker and Jesse Jensen will be back to the over the next couple of months.
Jeff, you need to speak from the podium, please. Can't have my clerk.
I didn't think he was gonna end up paying, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
So, as, you know, we approved the funding, we looked at funding. However, the plan itself still has to come to us, and that's, Gregory Tucker and Missy Gentry will be working with Bob Hughes and Robert. And as they bring that forward, we'll bring that back to y'all so everyone knows exactly what's going on.
Are you talking about the next round of parking?
Yes, sir.
Are they in process of planning that now? Just curious, hadn't heard.
So I believe that they are, but I don't know to what extent at this point, because
If we get an update from Robert, I think it would be very helpful for us to understand what they're moving and how that is in conjunction with the construction that they're going on, or planned construction.
Yes, so we can do that. We're moving on into the proposed project, so we can keep, sharing some updates as we go. A lot of these you're going to hear about here shortly on the recommended list. So Clint can come up perhaps and talk about the Assembly Street grade separation, just all the efforts, lots of great effort going on with this, from a federal perspective with the grants that we're working, and have gotten some feedback from them this week that seems very promising. They're asking a lot of good questions of us. Ralph indicated that he thought that was a good sign, because they could not be asking questions, right? So it sounds like they're looking at us, at least in the process. So Clinton, you want to add to that and then move on to beautification and cleanup program?
Yes, ma'am. We were delighted to get some responses to our mega and infra grant application. We got those on Friday around midday, but it was a list of questions, four in particular, with a deadline of noon on Monday to get them answers. We got them answers, and all indications are, as Ms. Wilson said, it was really, really good news that they were drilling down and asking some very specific questions that we were able to answer. So our fingers are crossed, and that was very positive for us. We've also made our submittal for the coordinating council to get on in the process of still moving forward. There are other grant applications due in October. But Chrissy and a few others, some real separation that we're looking toward also. So again, apply for the opportunity that we can. So I'll mention, Ms. Wilson, you wanted to speak about beautification?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I think that one, both, if you can, Clint, beautification and cleanup program, and then the gateway signage, which we sent some briefing notes to the council with their packages on Friday. I know those are very important.
So we'll start with beautification. Our administrative policy committee met several weeks ago, and we talked about the different things that we might be able to do. Robert presented kind of a buffet of alternatives, and then we drilled down and are coming back, and in a bit we'll be asking for some specific funding. But it was provided to you as a list of things, I guess most notably, potentially looking at peeling some of our staff away from the more hospitality-oriented districts and possibly letting them serve themselves with a tax allocation. There's a potential so that we could redeploy our staff to do other things. Utilizing contractors to mow some of the large open spaces that we're using staff to mow right now, and that of course would come at a cost, but that would free up our staff to do some of the more detailed work that may need to be done. We obtained some costs from local contractors to clear debris, sweep, and spray our curbing on main thoroughfares coming into the city and exiting about 4 times a year, working with that. That would allow us to get the curbs in a decent shape to facilitate painting of the curbs.
We are meeting on the 16th. Robert Anderson will be joining us with the DOT commissioner and the project managers and stuff to talk about how we are going to address this, because I have been very the team out about how we need to, this is the capital city, we gotta start acting like it, and that we need to have these thoroughfares cleaned and maintained, and we need to have a better working relationship to leverage that. I also would like to say is that as we start to formulate this, we need to take advantage of all the garden clubs. I've had 5 garden clubs come up here and visit with me, all wanting to help, through their grants, investing, cleaning, maintaining, and teaching as part of that. So we want to make sure that we can address that. And I think the other part of that is yesterday I had an opportunity to visit with President Smith at CIU. And last year they had 2,100 folks start at their campus and go through our community and do a cleanup. They did house paintings, they did cleanups, they did gateway. He would like to join forces with us and work out through their connections and our connections to do a cleanup day in Columbia. Like hey, every business, everybody, we got this Saturday, massive cleanup across the city, mowing, cleaning, clipping, and everything, so that we all can put them in, and it's much easier for us to maintain those. As we build this, we need to take that into thought process and plan something that's for fall, because I think everybody feels the same way. We've got a beautiful city and we're hiding it behind weeds and overgrowth and trash.
Mayor, you were speaking to kind of that public education I've heard y'all speak about before, educating citizens about their responsibility to the curb.
Well, and to be honest, some of it is ourselves. One of the things I'd love for us to see is by the ballpark that we own. It's completely overgrown everywhere, and that is a gateway to everybody coming in. We need to go ahead and cut that, get that cleaned up. But I'm taking the DOT out to Monticello Road, coming in on the gateway. You can't even see the turn signs or anything, and that's a state highway completely covered up at the exit. So, these are the things we've got to start maintaining, along with fixing our signage. Jarvis Cotton still has its capital place to be from 1978. I think it'd be great if we, really, I do think it, and DOT has committed to take down a lot of the abundance of signs that we have and really help clean up. But we have a great opportunity to really make Columbia shine as the capital city. And I think with us working together with everybody and bringing all the parties together, we can make it happen. But this is a big deal. This is one of the single biggest things that people have constantly talked about. I don't care what neighborhood you are, what corner of the city you are. If you're a business owner or a homeowner, it's the same conversation going on nonstop. So I think, whatever we need to do to make that happen, we'd be committed as a city.
Mayor, I hope that I put this my scan of the beautification proposal that Clint Robert and the team's put together, these 7 items. I think they capture just about everything you just said in some shape, form, or fashion. If there's something that you all, want to really embrace, endorse, just tell us which item we need to add to this list. And the recommendations that'll come in a second, I think, would accommodate a lot of them.
Clint, do you think our proposal we got for street sweeping can it be done steady enough to really get on top of this, keeping it consistently?
Yes, sir. I think shedding some of the work of bush hogging, if you will, the large open areas, having contractors doing that at times, our staff, they can be doing other things that are harder to contract out and more skilled.
So the same applies for the grass cutting and the street sweeping.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So painting meters.
And just as a question related to what the mayor was talking about, meeting with DOT, like our street sweepers, can we run them on like I-126 at that bridge coming in to clean those curbs up, or do we have to get DOT's permission to do that?
We have a pretty good relationship with DOT, and I think as long as we do a notification, I think we can work through that time of day.
But we're not restricted, I guess, is the real. So more, please tell us that you're doing it. So, but I think those are good points, because I think somebody else around the table at some point brought up Broad River Road Bridge as well. you know, all these gateways that are coming in, we're seeing that same
Well, you
common
think to
area.
be on the schedule to run that sweeper and clean those curbs. Just, you know, again, I want, you have your meeting, just make sure.
I'm picking up every third Thursday on one, so anybody else wants to volunteer, they're gonna teach us how to operate the.
I really wanted to, I wanted to just try it.
I did want to add, and it's interesting, I just sent an email about this. One is, I think we need some, and I don't know the cost, but we need some notes, we need a ton of no dumping. And, so, no littering signs. We have a lot of key areas that people are dumping over and over and over again, but we have no signage that says things are dumped. I think that if we could put, and I think I talked to maybe Dave, but I think it would be good for us to put signs, more signs up to show that we have an expectation for people not to litter and dump in the areas that we know are pretty common. And I'm talking about maybe like 100, 200.
Mr. Herbert, I would add that the legislative committee will be at the State House lobbying hard to get the litter signs raised, because right now we're limited. I think if we can get it to $1,000 and people start getting some tickets, we're gonna help eliminate some of that. Because those empty lots we were talking about earlier, as you know, I mean, I see them on Luther King every morning when we ride through, you know, Stark Street, Cherry Street, and down Hyde Street, the same lots, Robert's going there to clean up every week, and I know you're seeing it in several areas in the district. But we've got to lobby them hard to raise that so that we can have something, an effective tool to stop it.
And I really just don't think it's fair for staff to have to continuously do what property owners are supposed to do. And we don't have the time to, if we need to focus on what the city is supposed to be doing, I really like to put an emphasis, especially in areas of individual property owners, making sure that they are maintaining their property.
Y'all ready to talk about signage?
Let's
Yes.
talk about it.
Let's talk about signage.
So several of you brought.
Yes,
forward
Mr.
really
Mayor,
good
Mr.
Yes, sir, Reverend McDowell.
Yes, let me just, I just want to piggyback on this good grief, street sweeping and of course dumping. That has become a voluminous issue within our city. We can't take the issue, and I think you viewed some of those places where dumping violations has been, it's just been terrible. It's good to hear about cameras, but I think enforcement becomes an issue. If the legislative committee is going to issue out tickets in the amount of 1,000 or however much, dumping, of course, in our neighborhoods has become an excessive problem. Folk are dumping where there's no lighting, where there's no cameras. And of course, when they are caught, we just cannot slap them on the hands. There has to be some stiff penalties. It's happening all over this city, unbeknownst to a lot of us who don't know where those dumping sites are until we are notified by someone in that community. So please, let's make sure that if we are going to talk about street sweeping, if we're going to talk about illegal dumping, we need to make sure that the same teeth we put into that dog to aggressively pursue these folk, we need to make sure that all those elements are ensured. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Clint?
So yes, sir, we'll move on to talk about signs. I know we've had several really good ideas looked at and had to come up with our own concepts. Welcome to Columbia signs have been talked about for quite some time. We've got cost estimates that range from $1.5 million to several $100,000 for different types of signs. And so I got feedback, and so Robert and Robert would be, he had to take care of an emergency for us. So we collaborated and we come up with an idea that we wanted to pitch to y'all and just see if you like this and if you want to move forward with it, certainly we'll use it at the will of council. But our thought is to hire a design consultant to help us come up with a welcome to Columbia concept of durable material, and develop 3 different classifications of signs. An anchor sign, if you will, that may be constructed of brick and a wood inlay or metal inlay, would be landscaped and lighted. We're estimating that one anchor sign would be in the $400,000 to $600,000 range. It's one anchor sign. It could be multiple anchor signs, but that would be a key entry points into the city. Carry that same design theme, that same concept to smaller, we'll call them category B signs. It could be deployed at many other locations, and then have a third category of sign that our sign shop could actually make that would mimic that same theme, and we could put that at many of the.
Clint, we need to put that back out. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I spoke to several cities who have, everybody's focused on the gateways and entrance. They're spending significantly less on really good looking signage. The materials today and everything else aren't at numbers, I'm gonna be honest with you, high.
Yeah.
We grabbed that number out of the sky, to be honest. We didn't want to lowball it there, so we grabbed that. But if we had someone help us design the sign and help us specify the materials, then they would come up with an estimate as well.
So, and we had shared an example with you all of what the ballpark would be, and I know this would have to go out to procurement, and we do it that way, but it sounds like it was going to be more in the $150,000 to $200,000 range, with the maintenance cost over time being something we need to factor in. I like the idea of 3 different versions, but I think we also need to kind of regroup on what we're envisioning for this. The conversations that I had with you all is that it would be nice for this to be consistent with some of the signage that was created for the NCAA tournament, that seems to also be in line with Experience Columbia, something that could be timeless and won't change as city administration and city councils change. So I would really push for us to use the approach of the signs that are that some of the examples that we had shared with you all.
Yes, ma'am. Some of those we had costs about $150 to $200, and a little bit off lighting and landscaping, and we really want to build on the durability of those materials as well, so we're not constantly maintaining. But that's certainly a good option for us.
And sure, I would add, we probably have 2 or 3 of the top sign companies in the world headquartered in or around Columbia. I mean, for us to go hire a designer to design something that likely would be made by them would be a redundant expense. I would suggest that you contact them direct. I mean, Colite, there's another Magna. I think
the easiest and simple and most transparent way to put a thing is to put an RFQ out and ask for submitted designs.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'd like, as much as possible, to choose a local company that can design and actually create the sign.
Rather than try to figure that out today, can we just kind of figure out what the capital amount might be for a new sign program and set that into the budget and then figure the details out?
Yes, sir. We've got an amount as an ask, and but you'll hear a bit. Okay. It's the ball moving, but we can absolutely put together an RFQ and put that out to local manufacturers.
I just think they've got in-house design, and as part of the competitive bid or thing, is they can shut all of it's confidential, so one group can't steal somebody else's design or whatever. But I think it would be the way to do it.
And it's gotta be durable whenever we do.
Oh, absolutely.
How to do this.
And I don't want a brick Taj Mahal either,
Yeah.
and other things. But there's some really good material out there today with some simple signs. One of the I'll make sure I send you a copy of one of the cities did. It's simple, but it just draws you to it, and it's durable.
Simple and durable. Yeah.
The 3 different categories.
Let's don't figure the plan out today. Let's just figure the amount.
It's going to take more than you think. If you do the A sign, when you had A sign or one sign?
Category A.
Category A signs is gonna be expensive.
Well, yeah, but you're also gonna have signs like if you go down Beltline, right past, Sato's, we got an old sign again, but it's just a sign we make it in the shop. It's the colors and everything.
But you go to Lexington County or go up to York County and see the welcome.
Well, we ain't doing that.
Well, we don't have to capitalize the whole thing in 1 year. It
Yeah, and that's.
should be maybe a 1, 2, or even 3 year spread of the money.
And so my recommendation would be, skipping the design consultant as well and going straight to an RFQ, but then also seeing if this classification makes sense or if it's more of a phased approach, because there's 18 gateways, you probably won't do all 18. But if we can have the 5 to 7 major gateways taken care of in the first 3 years, I think it could be something we revisit over time. Because I think we're also moving towards the whole less is more and getting rid of some of these extra signs. So we want to be very intentional about not having too many. Because you also want it to be an attraction that people want to come take a picture, right? And they want to stop by and say that they came to Columbia. So having a more conservative approach is something I would ask us to consider when it comes to the larger gateways. I don't think we need to have it at every major gateway.
That's one way.
I would add, Clint, that according to Central Midlands cause, the Midlands said they have the gateways. So if it is a phased approach, I'm not sure how many they're biting off for the city, specifically.
Yes, sir. I think it's coached by NDLG. We're absolutely coordinating and we'll think about that as well. Yes, sir.
And we look forward to their donations to help pay for it.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Robert's back. I'm sure you covered it all, Clint. So, yeah.
No,
Okay.
thanks, Robert. Thanks for your report. We appreciate it.
We'll give you all the money you need.
Thank you, Robert. And Clint, thank you all so much. So, we're just continuing down on this and find it.
The list in your packet is a list of both projects and plans. I did separate them out into lists. One, programmatic, which have recurring costs to them. So they are under combined.
I think we're still on the plan and proposed, Missy, with the Cultural Affairs Office being the next one.
Can I just ask a technical question or something? When I look at these, they're operational expenses. They're not capital.
Correct. And that's the programmatic, I've tried to separate it out.
I know, here, again, this is just a technical question. We approved an operating budget, correct? So these would be changes to the operating budget?
Depending on how you fund them. If you fund them with fund balance, we would amend the budget, that would amend the budget, we would add it into the budget for.
If they're operating expenses, the budget would have to be amended, period.
Correct. And then if they
That's
are,
what she's saying.
and then if you, and I actually have that on a slide going forward, if we fund them, if we try to incorporate them into the budget that's already approved, so that either have to be approved, the general fund is allocated. So the only way you'd be able to allocate, the only way you'd be able to add TDC to the general fund without additional funding would be to reallocate.
Right, that was where I was heading with my question. I mean, if we're dealing with operating expenses, I mean, just, we've already approved the operating budget. And again, this is no commentary on if any of these are good or bad. It's just a technical question. I mean,
We're gonna sort that out as we hear from you all which funding source that you want to.
okay, but one option would be, or, in previous places I've been, they would say, okay, if we're adding this into our operating budget, the first question would be, do we have space in our operating budget anywhere to add these? And the second question would be, are there things in our operating budget that we want to drop out and add these? And the third question would be, do we want to add them in this year? And I guess you could identify an additional funding source, or you could decide the operational expenses, we need to add them next year.
That's correct.
I mean,
There's a slide.
no, what just gives me a tad bit cause for concern is that we're talking about capital funds and a capital budget and money that we set aside really for capital projects. Now, my suspicion is, are we going to talk about taking those capital funding dollars and switching them over to operating projects?
And some of the projects that you have put forward, some of the items that are on here, they would be operating, because therefore we would have to utilize, if you're going to fund them from the fund balance sources, then yes, it would be reallocated from the fund balance revenue to an operating expense with an impact on operating budget going forward, or fund it out of.
And it impacts the money that's available for capital expenditures. Okay, that's just, I mean, I'm just a little bit puzzled that how we moved from a capital expenditure process into an operating process.
Well, I think it's because we've got to help you all sort out what's available to you to spend, so to speak, without also spending everything. I mean, that is not the recommendation here at all, to spend down fund balance all the way. But I do think that we're in a year also where we have some other revenue sources that have, you know, done fairly well, whether it's H-tax or you've got rebate, or you've got some other things that don't have anything to do necessarily with capital, but they could potentially serve us well with some of these other items.
All right, let me say it a different way. We have consequential needs for capital dollars. Wouldn't you agree with that? Parks, Finley Park, you know, just generally facilities repair, renovations, so forth. It just, from a process perspective, it just gives me some concern that when people, and I'm talking about just generally, you know, just human nature, are faced with a choice of something that is important but not thing versus something that's an operational thing, we tend to go with the things that are operational and may not reserve the capital that we need to make our city a more beautiful and a better place. So my question is as we move forward, I mean, especially if they're reoccurring expenses and we're taking one-time money perhaps to fund them, I mean, is it better for us to look at adjusting our existing general fund budget and prioritizing them and maintaining this so we can have better looking parks and better looking streets and spend capital, again, not talking about reserving, spending the capital on our structural and needs, or is this the better way to do it and say, okay, these are things that have come up operational since we had our talk, and we're going to make a choice today of whether we're going to spend our available funds on capital or we're going to take some of it and do these operations. Again, I don't know the answer. I think we need to answer that question. And it may not be this year, but if it's not this year, we darn sure need to do it before we go into next year, because we do have some deferred maintenance issues and some capital issues that, you know, I'm just not so sure unless we start to begin to reserve certain things that we're going to have the funding to tackle things like, without going into longer term bond financing. And I will just tell you, bond financing for maintenance CapEx is not something I don't think we want to get into. I mean, huh?
Buying a boat on credit.
Yeah, it's like spending all the dorm money on other things and not redoing your dormitories. So it's just, again, I just think it's something that we need to be cognizant of when we're doing this, because we've got some serious capital needs.
I thought, so I'm looking at the top of this list, I'm thinking we just didn't finish a lot of this during budget season. And there's a comprehensive list of major projects or programs that have been requested by or discussed with city council. And I think today is the day to kind of give priorities of all of this, and regardless of what area it may be in. But I think staff kind of needs to know, obviously we can't do all of these, and what does the council agree, or which direction you want the staff to go to? And so assuming your position would be.
My recommendation would be we go through the capital projects, and again, I don't want to change the pattern, but my recommendation would be you go through the capital expenditures first, and you allocate the capital you want to allocate, and then if you have remaining funds left over, you would then look at operating things that you might want to put additional money. I do think it's somewhat dangerous to, yes, ma'am.
It breaks down capital budget.
I know, but again, are we gonna go through the capital funding first and then look at what's left over?
My recommendations are on your next
That's what it
sheet.
is.
So if out of $15 million or so of fund balance that I never recommend you spend all the way down, my recommendations are that you spend almost $5 million in the type of projects we're just now talking about. The other programs are things that this council, in some shape, form, or fashion, have brought up that are more programmatic. And so we didn't certainly want to ignore those by any means. But yes, sir, I think we were on this full list because you all asked to go through the full list. To be honest with you, I wasn't planning to go through the full list. I was going to jump to the capital, but we ended up going through, which I think is helpful to give context. But our next page is where you're going to find our recommendations, and my recommendations start with the capital. Yes, sir.
Look at the draw that we're having to talk about general capital projects, and also talking about this list of plans and proposed programmatic. And the programmatic items have come up over the past several months,
Right.
so to say, and then definitely, allocations for capital projects, or anything that's on the list of plans and proposed of the capital projects would become part of our capital program as well.
We can either continue to finish this list and everything, or we can go ahead and jump to capital. If whichever one you want to do it.
Well, we finished the planned capital spending list at the top.
And those are things that are already.
I would argue that the gateway, the command bus, patrol cars, and other stuff like municipal court are capital projects.
That's right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
And then the rest of it is what I would call programmatic.
That's the council wish list. I think we need to switch over and see what the city manager wants to really suggest.
I'm happy to do that. I just think it's important that we realize that we have capital needs, and then there's programmatic things, and that as we move forward, to be as disciplined as we can to maintain those capital dollars, for the capital needs of the city. I mean,
and I think the city manager is going to do that on the next page.
Okay.
This one right here.
Let's go to the small.
It's in this book.
It's 3 pages.
Not the next page. It is. While you all are getting to this page of your memo that was sent, we'll talk real quickly about the funding options, which might give some context. So what we tried to do is give you the different funding sources. Obviously, your fund balance is where you're going to find my recommendation, which I think is in line with what we were just discussing, Councilman Taylor, about really focusing on these capital projects coming out of your fund balance first. Then we tried to break out some things that the council has placed a priority on, like gateway signage and beautification, et cetera, public restroom facilities, and apply funds under the various categories, and there's some legend at the bottom where you can potentially use other sources of funding outside of the fund balance. Obviously, police patrol cars, the one officer, one car program is something that's very important for us to get it funded as well. So what we can do now is go ahead and jump to that, if that will help you all help. If we can, maybe help sort out the funding sources that are in addition to fund balance is where you're gonna find the almost $5 million in capital needs that we recommended first.
What is the Congaree remaining proceeds?
So the Congaree Vista Fund, from some funds that were set aside over the years, and we utilized it when we need to utilize it. If you want to give the amount remaining for that.
So the remaining amount for the Congaree Vista Fund is right at 1.4 million. 1.4. The programs were originally set aside as the redevelopment for the Vista District Parks and other facilities in the Congaree Vista District. And a lot of allocations between that, those funds to items that were in that district.
And we can go line by line, or we can take questions, whatever is your preference.
Well, if you want to, maybe you want to go down line by line, or you want to ask questions?
However y'all like to proceed. I got 30 minutes.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
I like everything that the city manager recommended, but I'd like to have more information on the Office of Gun Violence for the $892,000.
Yes.
And I'd like an explanation of the $500,000 on grant services contract.
Well, let me take the grant services contract, and I'll defer to Mayor Rickman on the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And as you've heard us say today, for example, really excited about the potential for a MESA and Christie grant application that we submitted, and for the Assembly Street project, federal programs, these grants, big grant programs that we really have to engage outside sources to help us be competitive. And so we did that with Mega and Christie, and a lot of our work by our internal staff, that we had to go out to DOT to utilize their consultants that are already working on Assembly Street. So there's going to be some additional dollars, grant dollars we can apply for, and that's just one program, right? So with ARPA and some other indications that we're getting from federal government, with Mayor Rickman and his visits, and with Conference of Mayors, has learned of several opportunities on the horizon, whether it's in energy or HUD or DOT, whatever it might be. We wanted to be prepared and have the right experts who can be on the ready to help us apply for those opportunities. The $500,000 is not an allocation that would be a retainer every month. It is more of a set aside so that we could use in certain categories, and our procurement staff has done a phenomenal job. We had an RFP process, all of these big grants, folks applied, and we broke them out in categories based off the different subject areas I mentioned. And so we're prepared on Tuesdays. Council is going to bring forth a recommendation for you all to vote on a grant consultant team that would be on the ready to either help us identify opportunities and then apply for the opportunities. But they would only get paid as the opportunities are identified.
So just setting aside money to use.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's critical. It's beyond critical. We've been talking about this since February. If you remember in our retreat, one of the things that we identified is there's so much funding, and the majority of it is application-based, and that the time we would try to hire somebody, train them, and get there, we would miss the opportunity. And so we went through an extensive RFQ process and RFP process to get the right folks to be able to help us, get these applications in. And a lot of these folks are folks who used to work in the agency, so they know how to make sure the application is set properly and how we get it in, making sure that we have advantage of it. Because one of the things that I spent after being in Washington, at the White House and meeting with the secretaries, I understood, especially with HUD, we had a follow-up 4.5-hour call, and we found out there were so many opportunities that we weren't geared to apply for that we need to go after, along with DOE, Commerce, you name it, I mean, transportation, just these mega grants, just this grant we're putting in, there 4 different application processes.
Well, I think you and I feel, my concern was it was $500,000. It's a pool of 500.
Yes.
Yeah.
As long as it's a pool of 500 and not 500 line item budget for a grants office or something, I'm totally fine.
No,
Is that the same question here?
Same question.
It's
Okay.
a not to exceed amount, and we would do task orders, as I said, as the opportunities present themselves. I think, again, here's a recommendation, we have it under grants, and grants is a variety of sources, but the grant we are considering here is ARPA.
All right, so we are in the general capital projects is what we're looking at, or we're looking at both of these graphs?
Well, I asked you, did you want to go down the list? I didn't hear.
No, I'm going to ask questions. I just want to make sure I'm asking the questions on the right chart.
You know, Mr. Duvall jumps his,
Okay.
you know, his questions are on the bottom.
Just a couple of suggestions
Yes.
and a question. Like on the HVAC wide, I would split that into 2 years, to be perfectly honest with you, because we ain't got the money to fix if everything, you know, in other words, by the time we get to some of the HVAC rehab, I think it might be out of date. So I just would split part of those this year, part next year.
Now, I'm looking at Stacy, because he's the boss on that. That works for you, Stacy? Can you come forward? Thank you, I'm sorry.
Hey, you don't want Miss Hammond after you say.
Plan we had in place for that was, in the past, we did a roof evaluation. And what it did was change the trees, what was bad. It gives a chance to plan for what's bad. So that's what this evaluation was going to be, HVAC, just try to get a game plan in place.
If you think it helps you more to do it one time, I'm fine with it. I just don't think we're going to be able to get to it all in one swoop, so I was just looking at spreading it out. But whatever you want, I'm good.
It's the evaluation period.
Whatever you want, I'm good with.
Future.
Okay?
There's 53 buildings, isn't it?
That's what.
Yeah, it's a lot.
All right, my next,
Thank you.
thank you, sir. Next one I've got just a quick question about is,
I'll go first, Stacy, in case they.
it's Finley Park. I would really like to see us out of either ATAX, preferably one of the local or the state, accrue at no less than $1 million to $1.5 million towards that program and get that on an annualized deal to where hopefully we can finance the redoing of that part in the short term in a shorter basis.
So I'll get Jeff to
Okay.
find our recommendation on this one.
Because you're not recommending anything, really, right?
We're recommending the 19 million so we can move it forward, but utilizing the sources that you're talking about.
We don't have 19 million.
So can you explain the bond?
I understand that, but I thought this was an allocation of our dollars.
Yeah.
Well, it would be, at this point, it would be recommending funding exactly, I think in terms of what you're referring to, the combination of the variety of the revenue sources from the special revenue combined with some what's left to be able to do a short-term financing.
Okay, well, so let me see. My recommendation on this would be, if let's just say you want to do a 5-year or even a 7-year deal, that what you're doing is you're accruing enough each year to get to 17 million. You follow what I'm saying? I mean,
We were wanting to get the commitment to set it aside from the different sources.
I understand.
The only reason why, sir, is if we don't, they're shovel ready in January and.
I understand, but from a budgeting perspective, when we're looking at reserving funds, how much of our existing funds do you want to, in other words, let's just say, for example, if Mr. Palin wants to do a 7-year bond, or not even a 7-year bank deal. Yeah. I'm using this as an example, Howard. So the guys like me. If you want to do it, you can do a bank deal, but that's another story another day. But my point is simply is, okay, then over the course of 7 years, if it's a $20 million, let's make it a $21 million project over 7 years, you need to accrue 3 years each year for 7 years plus the interest cost. So coming out of our funding that we have available this year, how much of that do you want to accrue for Finley Park, is where I was coming from.
Let's let the finance.
I don't know why he does say, because he simply has told me exactly how he wanted to do it, so I'm gonna let him do that.
So, our thought was for year one, we have several different sources of funding around us to kind of scrape several.
And it can come from different
So
places.
you do cash funding up front and then issue a bond for the next 6 or 7 years.
Okay, then either way, then how much of that money do you want to put in the capital budget for this next year?
Yeah, so, no, I don't have the exact numbers. I have the instructions, so if this is what,
Can you do it,
I can come back.
can you come back?
Oh,
That's what y'all really.
We're just ready to move.
I know.
Y'all are comfortable, we're ready to.
I know, but my point is simply, if we take,
You wanna go ahead and accrue some now. and-
well, you got to.
Right, but we have, you need to come back with a recommendation of the source of where that's gonna accrue in a dollar amount so that we can have it lined in and budgeted so we know as we're moving.
That's right, and you should budget it out
Out of eight.
for the next 7 years, so that, because you know that money's not gonna be available for other deals. So, as a placeholder, what number do you wanna put in there?
I don't know if I can give you a number today. If this is how we're going to do it, I can by next Tuesday easily. I can have the entire number and the package put together.
But before we approve, I mean,
We're not approving anything.
I don't know. Okay, that's fine. And all I was gonna say is, before we give nods and everybody gets happy about spending stuff, if you're gonna take $3 million out, or if you're using as an example, $3 million of the money we have available for this year, and we're gonna accrue it into Finley Park, I think you wanna know that your number that you're looking at available is reduced by that number. That's what I was getting at.
What's around the hook for in the future?
So that's all, so all I'm saying is, as a
So let's take
placeholder,
$3 million from hospitality reserves and put it towards Finley Park as a placeholder, period.
it can be from hospitality reserves, it can be from accommodations tax.
I'm just seeing the number
I
there.
know, but what's cool is, I don't think the A-tax number is on our available funds, is it?
It is as far as we're concerned, I don't know about as far as y'all.
I didn't see it when I went through the email, the one that came to me by email.
You're talking about state.
State and the local.
Well, the tourism, we can't do anything we can't commit any of that until after December.
That's right, but I mean, we can put a placeholder on it, that's where I'm coming from.
Well, I guess what we need to decide is the dollar amount.
That's all, so just so everybody knows.
But I think what we just want to know, we will figure all of that out down to the penny for you. We just want to know in concept, you all agreed with the fact that.
That was gonna be the next,
move Finley forward, we're gonna have to do something like this.
that would be the next question is, however you ask that in a work session, everybody smiles that wants to move it forward. I'm looking to see if you're smiling or not.
This is right ear is yes, left ear is.
Don't say that. Jim McDaniel will be.
Pull your ear. Which ear you pull?
I'm for.
I'm gonna receive that as let's move forward
All right.
and figure out the numbers.
Okay, that's, you know, let me say, I would just congratulate you on that, because I think that is a really good way for us to be looking at capital budgets going forward. On the River Park bandstand, will we take that out of H-tax?
I have those, I have all three River Park parks.
Hungry.
Hungry, this-
This is that was included.
Okay.
Funded those projects.
Okay, that's, all right. And then the only other question I have is down below, I do think we probably should separate, the judicial restructure costs from the facility remodel on municipal.
Yes,
No issue with the amount, I just think we ought to separate them.
absolutely.
Other than that, I'm good to go.
Very good.
My two things that I would like to, I think we're better off with the animal shelter looking to lease a new facility, old grocery store or one of those facilities where they can have an indoor that's closer into town, better than trying to piecemeal what's out there. Because we're talking about $500,000 in here for that, and at that rate, we're better off leasing a space that has flooring, facilities, in the works and using it. I mean, we got enough empty commercial space out there that makes a lot more sense, in my opinion. And I'd like us to explore that before we commit to that type of funding.
And can I add, it's something we talked about on that same deal, is how can we is there a 501c3 that's connected to our animal shelter? And then, looking at how we can empower them for capital raises, because I do think the public tends to respond very well. Charleston County has raises pretty much all their capital for for facilities. And I just think that would be something.
Well, Austin Myers gave, what, $1 million to Camden.
That's what I'm saying. He lives in Columbia.
We get millions of them.
So, I mean, point being is, whatever you want to do on the current animal shelter, I'm fine with. But I do think going forward, finding a better facility and getting, and if it's hiring a development person for them, to really run a campaign. Yeah.
I do think moving it into a space that's in a more commercial zone will help it from its adoption and all its services and where it's located. At the time, when we invested in there and built it, it made a lot of sense. Today it doesn't. And there's just, I think even at $600,000 put into it, it's not going to solve the problem out there.
A lot of rent for a lot of square footage.
Yeah.
You did it right.
For a long period of time.
So explore what a lease will look like and apply some of the funding towards that potentially.
I think it's going to be significantly less because they'll be able to do everything under one roof. Think about all the kennels and everything. All of that can be put in one place. You've got commercial, industrial piping and wash shop. I mean, there's just too many empty spaces that could be utilized for a great project and be a nice presence. I mean, if you look at what the water department's office on Beltline has done to that stretch. I mean, these type of investments that improve and enhance the quality of these animals that are being rescued and getting back out to what it does for the neighborhood that we place it in, I think it's well worth us looking down that path.
True.
And I do have one other.
Yes, sir.
On the police department's relocations, I mean, I'd really like to see us look more at leasing those instead of buying them, because it seems like demographics change and crime patterns change, and I'm just not so sure that we wouldn't be better off renting or leasing our spaces to give us the flexibility to move around when we need to move around versus buying. I mean, I'd yield to whatever you want to do, but it's a less capital intensive for us to do that, and it gives you, I think, a lot more flexibility.
I would tend to agree. I think we've talked about that in the past, especially as you're looking at redistricting and putting that gives us a lot more flexibility. It also will give us, to be quite honest, some better facilities for the officers and fit the exact needs, because then we're not budget driven and we're able to really do some better things. I would support that as well. The only other thing that I saw in here on this capital that we had in here was we need to make sure that we look at the security cameras possibly from hospitality. That is for the parks. That is, with the balance that we have there, I think it would be something we should look at as a funding source. And kind of try to utilize what we can for those.
It's a reoccurring cost.
And then I had a question around the master plan. Didn't we do a master plan several years ago? Did we really need to do a new master plan?
Yeah. I haven't been able to get
Get up to the podium, Randy.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Miss Hammond's gonna come across this table.
Thank you, Mayor. You're doing a great job.
I'm just here to serve.
So, 7-year master plan, that was, presented in 2013. It was never officially, by the previous council. The new master plan would be a 10-year master plan that will allow us to, in essence, forecast the future in terms of major projects, capital projects moving forward, and programming needs and interests in the community.
Can we maybe take a look at the existing master plan look what's been executed, what's outdated, and maybe look at that instead of committing to $180,000 on the master plan?
Yeah, we can look at that to see where, we've been working from it based on, the needs in our parks that they identified.
Because we've got parks that need upgrades in playground equipment and stuff. I mean, if we can get an upgrade to our plan for $50,000 and we can put $130,000 or $100,000 into playground equipment and other things to enhance the parks we have, I'd rather do that.
That will give us some leverage using the previous master plan.
That's true. I mean, we got the master planner in your office. I mean, you've seen what he's done. I mean, I tell you, I think he's one of the greatest assets that we have, Todd, absolutely. I mean, everybody who's seen what he's thought about drawing, I mean, they can't stop raving about it. So, you know, let's utilize what we got.
Some other components of the master plan involve public outreach process and park analysis of our parks for capital improvement.
I think some of that can be technology driven based on what we are all looking at, some of the public engagement stuff that our clerk's working on and these others. We may be able to use technology really to do that and save money and get better quality data.
And to your point, you know, we talk about MLK Gym, several gyms that are of that
Soccer
period. The new construction technology, where I think you mentioned in this, Mayor, the new wall systems that could make a real difference, much more affordable. Can we be sure that master plan takes that approach into account?
The low-hanging fruit.
I mean,
No one
I
else
was
pays
saying-
attention to that, they just know what they gotta do.
I think it would be helpful if we do see the current plan that we all with it, because there's still some stuff to do. We may want to keep that, I'm not sure. I also wanted to add to the sidewalks and funding programs, if someone could send me a list of what the priorities are. The sidewalks.
Okay, you live near the school?
I don't.
Then here's the bottom of the list.
And then I'm hoping, Mayor, that we'll have a discussion about the Office of Gun Violence before we vote on this.
Mr. Mayor.
Could you?
Okay, thank you. I'd like to talk about the homeless coordinator piece. I know we had talked briefly about this, and would like to hear from staff what you all are thinking in terms of grant funding, because this is something I'd like to move along pretty quickly if possible.
So my plan is to bring on the 14th, and it had been listed some updates, and I said, yes, we're going to take a session actually about some of the contracts.
Yeah.
Excellent, yes, ma'am. We had a pretty thorough, comprehensive staff meeting with all parties involved, and I have some thoughts and some recommendations, but if possible, we'd like to do that on Tuesday.
That sounds good.
Yep. And then we just have that placeholder there because we know we've got to allocate funding. I'm hoping if eligible, a coordinator position could be grant funded, but we're looking into community development, grant that, to see if there's eligibility there. But if not, we'll figure it out. But there's some other recommendations that we can make.
So the consensus is to move forward with something like that.
That's what we were.
I think we shouldn't hold back the position based on trying to get a grant. We should be able to work that position in with existing funding in our budget.
Right, that's why we didn't put a particular category there. We're just looking at all the categories.
Thank you. Reverend McDowell, you have a question?
Well, Mr. Mayor, in the midst of all the paper shuttling, shuffling and that sort of thing, it's kind of hard to hear on this end, but I do see the city manager's funding request recommendations. We talked a little bit about, I think you mentioned the animal shelter, and of course this reading is so small, and the animal kennel flood insurance, that's over, I think I see $400,000 for the shelter building and $100,000 for the kennel insurance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're
All right.
recommending that we go look at renting a place and not spending that money.
All right, all right. I thought I heard that we were spending that money, and I was just gonna say, it just doesn't seem like we can do $400,000 for animal shelter, and we got folk homeless out in the street. The other piece of that, of course, what about the kennel resurfacing? That's 40,000. That's a
No, Reverend McDowell, what we're talking about doing is looking at trying to find an existing building that would fit the needs so that we wouldn't have to make that large of a capital investment, you know, empty grocery store or something of that size so they could expand instead of putting that type of money in the existing facility. So we're gonna have staff come back with a recommendation.
That sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, you're welcome, Mr. Brown.
I just had one line item I'd like to talk about. The culture office, we have a placeholder for the $400,000 out of H-Tax. I, you know, with several new members of council, Mr. Mayor, I would like to possibly offer up a work session for a subcommittee, Arts and Historic, for the review of that Amplify for them, for us, again, since it's been so long, and what that hybrid structure looks like, what was suggested through that. And then after that, send it to Arts and Historic to really put together the nuts and bolts of what it is, what the arts community wants to see. You know, is it a community arts program focused, local arts fellowships? Is it a art studio space lease? How can we leverage that funding and that position and that structure the best? So I don't have any firm structure, scope, or operation to put forward to council. So that would be my suggestion, to get to that, and then what that $400,000 would entail.
And I would ask if y'all will look at that process, that we're not using 400 as the number, that we're looking at what are the functions that we're on, and the cost around that. That's the route we're going, because, you know, the previous budgets have been floated around. I don't know that I could support what was floated around before, with the allocations and these increased salaries. And, you know, to be quite honest, there hasn't been a lot of discussion. And I hope you can get consensus, because I hear that every time I meet with the arts group, I get 6 different suggestions, but none of them round about what we're doing. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea if you bring it to the committee and kind of come back with an idea.
Yeah. So just to give you some background on where that 400 came from, was looking at other municipalities, a dollar per resident for the arts, Raleigh, Charlotte.
$144,000.
So $3 per resident, and just, I guess we rounded it up to 400. The focus was not to be on heavy salaries, obviously. It was to get the arts into the communities, whether it's through the Parks and Recs, or fellowships, to get those initiatives done. But all that, a lot of these suggestions come from Amplify. That's why I just want to make sure that the council is updated and educated on that.
And so that would go through the work sessions in a committee. I mean, like the overall discussion starting.
Yeah, I would think a 20, 30 minutes sometime in the next 30, 60 days in a work session.
Mr. Taylor, then I want to follow up.
There's a question from Mr. Brown. Is that $400,000 worth of additional money, or does this replace other entities that are already in our operating budget, so the net new money would be less than 400?
So to be determined, I guess. You know, if we have a contract in place for a local arts agency, does that contract continue on? Does it morph into something under?
See, I think if you'll cover that in your work session, that would be great.
Absolutely.
And I think it's very important, there's a key element to that, which is the grant piece, because one of the things I've noticed is with all these other cities I talk to, all of these arts and cultural offices are bringing in lots of grant money, and they're also bringing in the private sector, which is not done here. I mean, I had somebody come today, and, you know, I'm coming to the city before I even think about calling any other person. We can't operate.
Yeah, being a resource for our arts community, I think, is the most important. job of this office. So I'll set a work session.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
And I know we're going to continue to have this conversation about public restrooms, but there is a real need. This weekend was a great example, where we have an incredible crowd downtown, and some of our businesses they've extended the invitation, but it's getting to the point that it's hindering their business. So I really think we've got to take a hard look at that and come up with a plan for a public restroom. I'm a big believer in it, but also in one that it's got to be attended. We can't have it unattended, and if you look through other cities and stuff, that's what they do. So I think we really got to take a look at that as we continue to move forward.
Mayor, in that same tone, it's brought up to me twice, and whether it's a beautification deal or whatever, is also let's look for a program downtown that takes the hurdy-curdies off the street, whether it's to the back or underground or something. I'm hearing more and more about the trash receptacles in front of all the businesses. So again, not for discussion today, something for you guys to think about how we address to that.
But I think, Robert, this would be a good time to revisit that group that we talked to before with the lift and see if they progressed. There was a group that was trying it. The problem was they just didn't have enough clientele to justify doing it, but it's all underground, so you have, and it pulls out. It's very,
I just said that's going to be, I mean, a lot of it could be moving some to the back where we have alleys, and it may have a capital cost, not a capital, but an operating cost, because you can't send that articulating machine down an alley to pick it up. But
So I'll dust the plan off I did about 15 years ago that put front loader containers behind in every alley almost downtown, so every business could use them. But Jaterra is the name of the company that's doing it.
if you come back to something on that, that'd be great.
But I also think, to your point of code enforcement education in our hospitality districts about that, there's several small businesses in 5 Points that can pull them around. They just, they don't.
not
Right.
They leave them out?
Oh, yeah. Right down Gervais Street and look at the side of number 1 Main. You got a new hotel going in there, and there's probably 8.
Don't get me started with all the mud that's all over the street from that hotel the other day. Everybody was, around my phone was blowing up.
Any other questions, Darren? And the only other items from the green list we started on that has all the items that didn't make their way to my recommended here would be the incident command funds, and that doesn't mean we're not looking at other options to get that funded. And then I know the quiet zone, we're kind of in a place where, you know, we may need to be nimble to participate. We've already participated, but to continue participation on that. So we didn't necessarily know an amount to move forward.
Well, Ms. Gentry, I think, has come up with a plan that Senator Hall Putlian really likes, and I think we're going to phase in the thing. She's gone over it with him, and he seems to like it, and he's basically assured us that he will go to the General Assembly for funding for the balance of what we need for phase 2.
Can we move the ARPA to our next gathering?
Absolutely.
I've got to go to another event, and I think everybody here has been meeting all day, and
Absolutely. So if there's in general a consensus about what we laid out here, then we can bring these back to you and clean all this up.
One last question, and it's just, you know, you have it on here.
Yes.
We want to make, if nothing else, a goodwill allocation to our Assembly Street crossing commitment that we're going to have to do. Is it only for a dollar amount?
no, yeah, $5 million.
$5 million.
But you don't recommend spending $5 million this year.
So we
We would reserve it.
We reserve $5 million this year.
Yes.
All right, here's my question. The fact of the other capital needs that we need, and that we may have a couple of years to do that, do you want to reserve $5 million this year? Do you want to reserve $2.5 million this year?
I think the new grant opportunities is sort of, well, they say that's a hard.
Done. 225. Thank you.
Yes.
Who will adjourn?
Herbert wants to stay. She said she'd like
Oh,
to.
item, Mayor, and Missy did have a family emergency, but if we can, Teresa and I can answer any questions Mr. Taylor about the surplus funding. I know you all wanted that back on the work session. It's your third item on your agenda, the purchase
Oh,
of real properties.
Good, thank you. Has anybody got any questions about that? I mean, Ms. Herbert sent one around.
I like what you proposed.
Well, the staff, that's a staff proposal. That's not the
I
mayor.
liked it.
It's all we're doing
The
is,
ordinance.
yeah, it's, somehow, somewhere way back when, I suspect somebody, the city had a house or something that was next door to somebody's house. They wanted us to offer it. Well, we're dealing with some big properties now, and we don't need gamesmanship or the time that it takes to offer some of these things to the people next door. It should be frankly put out for public purchase.
I think my concern, is keeping the policy and maybe putting the definitive timeline on it, because we have a lot of businesses that have to move because they can't expand, and it would be great if they had the
They
opportunity.
can buy it, but we don't have any they certainly can buy it. They can put in a bid.
I think one of the challenges that we're seeing is that people are stalling the process.
Well, that's
Because they have the first-
Yeah.
It's creating, I ran that concept around a bunch of different folks, different mayors or whatever, nobody has that today. We're throwing it out, but I appreciate your thought. I got
That would be my ongoing concern.
I would, since Ed is on the thing, you have to be the acting senior member to adjourn. And we're not passing any ordinances. We're not gonna pass any ordinances while they're out.
That item, in all seriousness, though, is moving forward on you'll see it on your Tuesday agenda, so we just want to, if anyone has any questions.
We'll get first reading on it Tuesday, and then that way, it lets us move forward on 22, 21, and some of these other bigger
Peter, can you summarize what your concern is via email?
I'll put it in the thing in the
The chat.
I'll send one.
Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Madam Clerk, you want to call the roll for adjournment? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that was, he's on.